IT Google Hangout. We're so glad that you're here with us and that you could join us today. Our show is brought to you by the Intel IT Center and the IT Transformation Institute. My name is Corinne Buchanan, and I'll be facilitating today's episode. Before we begin our conversation, remember that you can use #TransformIT for any questions or comments whenever you're watching this, and we will gladly respond. We definitely want to hear from you. I'm now going to hand over the conversation to our host, Charles Araujo, and he's going to go ahead and introduce the theme and the guests for today.
Thanks, Corinne. I am so excited to be doing another one of our Transform IT Hangouts. I really love these because not only do we get dig a little bit deeper into the topics that we hear from the folks who are actually interviewing, but we just kind of get some different perspectives, especially, I think, today in particular, because we get those perspectives from the folks that are really living this day to day. And so today I'm really excited to have with us Will Assell, who's the CIO of the Mohican Band of Indians, Jeff Tunn, the CIO at Goodwill Industries of Central Indiana, and of course Chris Peters, the marketing guru with Intel, and that's just because I can't remember, your title's always long and changing, so we'll just go with marketing guru. So thanks guys for joining us. I think these Hangouts are particularly important for an episode like the one we're going to talk about today. We sat and chatted a little while ago with Cameron Gawley, the co-founder and CEO of BuzzShift. And even though Cameron's an IT guy at his roots, he's living in a very different world than most of us today. And it might be hard for some folks to translate what he had to share into kind of the day-to-day life of an IT professional. So I'm really excited to hear what Jeff, Will, and Chris have to say about it. So let's dive into this. In this first clip that we're going to show, Cameron is talking about one of my favorite subjects, big data, and why he kind of hates it, at least the term. And he'll discuss a little bit why we need to go from this idea of big data to more of this idea of data-informed and what that transformation looks like. And I think that it speaks not only to the specific issue that he's going to talk about, but really some of the more underlying perception issues that some of us in IT tend to have. So let's take a look at this first clip, and I think it's going to be an interesting conversation.
I think that, you know, where we're at in this world, we talk big data all the time, and I really hate the buzzword big data now. But the reality is that it's how we're leveraging the data to help tell stories now, and actually informing our content. So this whole notion of like data-informed content is fascinating to me, right? And I think that, you know, in the ad space, in the marketing space, everything is very assumption focused, where it's like, hey, I assume this is what the end user wants, right? But now we can actually look at data to tell that story a little bit differently and actually help create content. I saw Netflix actually as one of the key things that they were doing a little different than all the other networks was that they were leveraging their analytics. They were leveraging that data behind the scenes, and one of the key things I saw was House of Cards. Like, everybody loves House of Cards, but the reality is when they built House of Cards, they knew that it was going to be an Emmy-winning show before they even went to market with it, right? So.
And of course, in the form of a shameless plug, if you want to hear the rest of the Netflix story, you're going to have to actually watch the episode to kind of get all the details of how that worked. But I think, you know, a lot of people are referencing Netflix as this kind of as one of the harbingers of this kind of data-informed idea of not only content but development. And so I'm really curious, Jeff. Let's start with you, and everyone just feel free to dive in here. But you know, I think you really challenge this notion of just big data, that it's about what you do with it. I don't know how much that resonated with you and how much maybe you're doing some of that.
Well, it was kind of interesting because I attended a conference here in Indianapolis a few months ago, the Indy Big Data Conference, and one of the speakers actually said, you know, the way to start with big data is to get rid of the word big and just think about data. So for us, where we've really tried to use data to get smarter about the way we interact with our customers is through our loyalty card program. So we have Goodwill rewards for our shoppers and donors, and we have over 500,000 members that have our card and shop and donate at our stores. And with that, we're able to engage them at a whole new level, because now we know which stores they're shopping, where they're donating, how far they're traveling, what they're buying, what they're donating. and it enables us to reach out and interact at that detail level. And to us, we've just scratched the surface of understanding the power of the data that we have available.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that was really interesting as he was talking about it was this idea of kind of the shift, right? That when you talk about big data, it sounds very internally focused, right? It's all about the technology, the data itself. And when he started talking about data-informed X, right, and that it's shifting it, right, that's just the enabler to really where that's going. And so I'm curious if you saw that same thing and how maybe you see that applying in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, Charlie. I mean, from our day-to-day activities that we do at the Mohican, and we have a casino and we have a healthcare center. But the way the data drives it, and to tie it into the marketing perspective, is it really allows us, kind of tying into what Jeff said, in terms of from a loyalty and a promo standpoint, we can tell what's the favorite machines that our users and customers are on, what's their habits, what's their what times, and then we can tie that in on the back end to when's their birthday, or where are they located. So it really allows us to tie in what kind of promos and marketing campaigns, and to bring it to a broader state. We have Wi-Fi at the casino, and if they log onto our Wi-Fi, we can tell what sites they're going on, so we can sit there and tailor our marketing efforts to those sites and kind of have that drop off. If no one's visiting, if no one's visiting MySpace or something like that, we're not going to spend marketing dollars in that area. But if everyone is spending their time on Facebook, we know that we have to up our game, and that's where our customers are. And I think that's a great thing, and it's really helping us, in the organization I'm at.
And I think what's really interesting in both what Jeff and Will are talking about is, it's about solving a business problem or delivering actually a better service, right? It's in both these cases, it was about the customer and how do you deliver a better service. We talk about it from a marketing standpoint, but marketing is really about creating value for your customer, right? And how do you do that? And in all these situations, I see a lot of digital transformation that's happening through the data, right? It's the data insights that are gaining you an ability to drive your business more. And Jeff, you said drop the big from data, but one of the things that I've heard in marketing circles is small data, right? So the big data is like all this stuff, and you got to analyze it, and too much is too much, right? But if you really can ask the right question of what service or area you're trying to improve, then this whole data equation becomes much smaller. It's just like, what data do I need to inform a business decision to deliver value to the customer? And I think that's where the successful companies are applying data and the analytics engine for that.
So just very briefly, Chris, I know you're kind of an observer of the industry. You kind of like to keep a pulse on it. I mean, how big of just briefly, I mean, how big of an issue do you think this is in terms of people getting swept up in either the hype or the buzzword or the technical aspects of it and missing kind of that core question of the business value?
I think I liken cloud. I mean, cloud was a buzzword several years ago, and it has helped us, drive a discussion around how do you deliver different infrastructure to run a more efficient organization and deliver services and take advantage of resources. And I think big data is kind of the same way. Is the buzzword helps us start to have a dialogue and conversation, and that conversation shifts to where the value creation is. And I don't really care much about the term, right? The fact that people hate it brings us more dialogue around it, right? Exactly what we talked with Cameron, right? But clearly the value is in the data and the analytics and the capability that delivers back to the organization.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit, but continue on what I think is the real underlying thread of Cameron's message, and that is that IT people need to kind of change the way they look at things. In this next clip, he discusses what he calls the API world, which I thought was a really kind of a clever phrase here, and how the active creation itself is transforming and why maybe we need to change the way we look at this process. So let's watch the clip.
We're living in an API world. That's what I call it. It's like and an API world, meaning that it's like leveraging existing assets, leveraging existing technology that's already out there, and then we're combining things together, right? And creating the product by just combining. So we're no longer building, we're assembling, right? And so I think that that's kind of the world we're moving forward in. Is like nothing's really started from scratch anymore. Everything's like, let's take this and put it together. and I think that those are the best ideas. They've always been the best ideas, the ones that you're improving on existing ideas, right? But the reality is that how we do that, right? So how we do it utilizing technology, but in a creative way. Those are the people, the Ubers of the world, that are just taking it to the next level, right? And those are the companies that I see that are just flourishing. They're really just taking, two ideas that have already been out there for a long time, combining them, and then using a little bit of creativity in the mix and strategy, and then helping make that go.
So, Will, is this IT heresy? Is this, this idea? I mean, isn't that when we're in the business? We create, we go build, we code everything from scratch. I mean, how crazy of an idea do you think this is, and how are you responding to this if it's true?
Me personally, I love what Cameron mentioned here, because it is so true. We're living in an API world. It reminds me of that platform, IFTT.com, if this then that, right? So you have just everyone opening their APIs and people getting creative and creating these recipes and triggers where you could get a direct mention on Twitter and your Philips Hue light bulbs, flash, like a disco light or something like that. And I just think that's amazing. And what he says is spot on. So now you have it where people are able to create this disruption and this transformation through tying into these APIs and just thinking more creatively on as opposed to building something from scratch, how can we leverage those assets that we have and create something better? And in the end, just a product or a service that's better for the consumer. And if you're not building it from scratch, it sort of ties into a little bit of agile project management type mentality where you're more iterative as opposed to just streamlined SDLC. A has to come before B, has to come before C. So I think it's amazing. I really loved what Cameron was mentioning and speaking about there.
So Chris, I thought you were going to jump in there. I saw you go off mute, so I'll throw it to you anyway here. What is your take on this? Is this something? Clearly this is something that technology companies have kind of embraced in many ways. Do you see this as a challenge for IT organizations?
I think it is a challenge for IT organizations, although I was laughing about and smiling about was I actually had the reverse happen to me yesterday. So I'm in the marketing side, and we're talking about building a new portal for our field team to go find content. And our IT specialist says, well, let's just build what we got right now and evolve off of this other capability, because in 6 months the requirement's going to be different. And I'm a perfectionist, self-proclaimed perfectionist, right? So that's hard. I'm an engineer and a physicist, so I kind of relate to it's got to be built the right way. And I was like, no, we got to make sure we get it right. But it was a realization, and I saw this on the topic today. It's like, oh my gosh, right? I'm going to have to proclaim that I'm the problem here. But the IT guy here was the one saying, hey, we should go adopt an agile methodology and build on stuff. And I completely, agree with this. APIs, as a marketing guy, we got to be plug and play. So I think this is a really important piece, and I do think organizations are going to adopt it differently. Most IT professionals have probably come out of some kind of engineering training where there's a right and a wrong answer, and we have to accept that there isn't a right and wrong, and it's really an iterative build-out process.
Well, and I think there's another message there too. And Jeff, I'm curious, especially working in a nonprofit where there's often a much heavier resource constraint, how much you see an opportunity here, because I think to a large extent what Cameron's talking about is this idea that some of the greatest innovations, because there's the agile, the iterative elements of this, but it's also this idea of looking that instead of creating something from scratch and having to brainstorm, that you're looking at what's out there and mashing up things to create innovation without having to necessarily do this massive development effort. So, Jeff, I don't know if either of you are doing any of that, or B, how you see that maybe as an opportunity for IT organizations.
Absolutely, and that's what struck me about what Cameron was saying is it almost goes back to the old build versus buy routine, and our jobs become integrators to put these packages together. And you nailed it, Charles, when you talked about the size of the IT shop. That enables us to do more with less because we're putting together the different applications into a process flow, not necessarily building new applications, just tying them together. And I think one of the things that struck me as I was watching the clip earlier, And I'll put a shameless plug in for your book, Charles, Quantum IT, because I think in there you talked about, corporate IT shops aren't going to innovate and come up with a new technology. They may innovate their process, but they're probably not going to invent the new whiz-bang application or piece of hardware. And so what we've done is try to focus our attention on that business process, and let's pull this cloud app together with this on-premise app, and let's integrate the data so that the process runs end-to-end and make our business more efficient and provide innovation in that way. So that's kind of what I took away from Cameron's comments.
So I'm gonna throw this back a follow-up, and that mostly just to prove to anyone who's ever on on one of these hangouts that if you shamelessly plug me or the book, that I'm gonna let you talk more. But so how are you actually doing that? I'm curious. I mean, I think we in IT organizations, there's so much overhead that we have to deal with. I mean, how are you actually getting the folks within your team to kind of embrace that idea, to look at it from that perspective?
Well, we went through, gosh, probably a year and a half ago now, where we had a lot of our development team, for various reasons, left, and we were faced with, well, do we hire more .NET developers, which is, I don't know across the country how easy it is to bring in .NET developers, but in Central Indiana, there just aren't any that are available. So we, almost out of necessity, looked at, is there a better way of doing this rather than building all these applications ourselves? And what we ended up with was a core group of people that really bought into the concept of cloud and the agility, lowercase a, that cloud can bring to you, so that you can put these things together very quickly and very efficiently for the business, and really make a huge impact on the business, because you're not having to go through multiple code cycles, multiple test cycles. You're doing the integration, and that's it. So it was really kind of forced in a way out of necessity, but it ended up being a great alternative for us to pursue.
You got to explain the lowercase a for agility to me.
Well, just not agile. Agile, is a concept, right?
Okay.
Methodology. So lowercase agile is really meaning the word agile rather than brand. Sorry, I threw that out there.
No, I got smarter. So.
I like it. All right. Well, I think that one of the more interesting things about this episode is that Cameron's message was as much for the folks in marketing as it was for IT professionals. And in fact, I would say it applies almost across the board. And so, but at the same time, he didn't mince words when he challenged IT folks to embrace the opportunity and what that was going to mean, and that you had to kind of really break through the silos. And he kind of goes at one point here, we're going to see in this last clip about saying that maybe IT people aren't always the most collaborative bunch. And so I want to hear what he has to say about it and then get that reaction. So let's play this last clip.
Or, traditionally the CMO and CIO, they come together when they need to, but they really silo their departments. And now it's really that collaboration and bringing those two departments together and seeing how those departments can help feed off of each other. So I think that that's the crucial thing for the CIO is, it's really hard for a lot of IT people to be collaborative. They like to just kind of hoard back and own it. But the reality is that to be collaborative with the marketing team, you're going to help grow the company. They need you to help grow the company, and that's kind of where it is. Marketing needs the technology needs the marketing, and they really have to intertwine with each other.
All right, Chris. Before Jeff and Will dive in and deny this, so what do you think? Is this the truth? Do IT people have a tough time collaborating?
I spent 2.5 years in our own IT shop, and I didn't see that. But I did see at the same time there was a very big, tops-down management, even some organizational change that was happening that was reorganizing our IT shop to put some people in roles where they were customer-facing internally, right? Different lines of business that needed technology to integrate that. And so I think that can be done, whether it's natural or not, but I think there are things that can be done at an organizational level to encourage that from a cultural standpoint as well as from an organizational standpoint. And I do fully believe that we need to be starting to do more of that integration, whether it's in marketing or any other part of the line of business function that's happening in the company. Technology and IT are so interdependent upon the company's success from a growth or top line and bottom line revenue standpoint that if we don't, the organization is going to suffer, not an individual group within that organization.
Well, and I think, I did this slightly tongue-in-cheek, and I think that I think from at least my experiences, IT people generally want to do the right thing. They want to, provide value to the organization. I also think, though, there's this disconnect that can happen just in terms of the language we speak and the way we approach things that can cause that. Earlier in the episode, or actually in the first part of the episode, Cameron also talked about the fact that we are moving, in his mind, away from this idea of a simple CXO, right? COOs, CMOs, whatever, and that everyone is going to be the CXTO, that whether it's Chief Marketing Technology Officer or Chief Operating Technology Officer. And I thought it was an interesting statement, and that's what was kind of leading up to this whole statement that, hey, there's a huge opportunity, but only if both sides come to it. And if you're on either side and you don't get there, then you're going to be on the losing end of that. So, Jeff, I'm curious how, again, if you agree with that, you're in a CXO position. How do you see this coming together, and what might we be doing about it?
Yeah, what I always think about when you get into the whole CMO, CIO conversation is the Reese's peanut butter cup commercial from years ago. You got chocolate in my peanut butter. No, you got peanut butter in my chocolate. Well, same thing with marketing and technology, right? So I was reading an article in Forbes. This was probably a couple years ago now. They were interviewing a CMO who said, as a CMO, if you don't know technology, you should be fired. And I've kind of taken that to heart as a CIO and said, well, if you're a CIO and you don't collaborate and you don't know social media and you don't know marketing, you should be fired. So what we've tried to do is really focus on having marketing and technology work together. And in fact, for the last couple of years, I've had responsibility for both IT and marketing as CIO. The VP of marketing reported into me, and that was one of the reasons we were able to make that loyalty card program that I spoke of earlier work so well. Because yes, it was technology based, but it was also core marketing. And so I think that relationship is strategic for organizations to embrace. Between whatever your CXO is and technology, you have to embed that in the organization.
Wow, fascinating story. Actually, I probably want to hear more about that at some point here. But let me throw this over to you, Will. I'm very curious. So you're a young CIO. You were pretty open and vocal about your desire to be a CIO as you're on your career path and rising. What should somebody who is following your path, that's maybe a little bit younger, and is kind of seeing all this and hearing what Cameron has to say, what should they be doing to actually make this a reality, to put themselves in that kind of position, to be in a position to do what Jeff just described?
Wow, that's a great one right there. One of the biggest things that has helped me just progress is to be able to learn the core principles around business, around marketing, around operations, finance, and be able to understand that, so that way when I'm sitting there with my peers at the C-suite, I can recommend solutions instead of just being a note taker and going back and just trying to say, okay, what was that acronym he said? What was this that he said? Where I understand that, and then I can solve their problems at the table with business solutions. And I say business solutions because I really, to quote or paraphrase the CIO that has said this, there's no such thing as IT projects. They're all business projects. And that's what has helped me, is to be able to bridge that gap, so to speak, speak with the other C-suite executives, kind of translate what the solution is and bring it to their level, but also be able to speak their language. So being able to translate an IT project and show what's the value to the top line, what's the value to the bottom line, how it affects the customer experience. And in any organization and through the progression of my career, that's helped me immensely. Then being able to take those business needs and requirements and then speak to the technical folk, who some may be introverted in the engineering group or the software engineering group, and be able to kind of translate those business needs and help them understand why it is that they're so important, and intricate. And it's really moving away from that model of IT being viewed as a cost center to really IT providing value and in some cases becoming a profit center.
Are there training programs or things that get implemented, from your perspective as CIOs that need to be implemented to kind of encourage those softer skills or how do you move an organization closer to that collaborative role?
Well, one thing I'm doing, I'll answer real quick, Jeff. One thing I'm doing is I'm actually bringing in a professional consultant to speak to the team. I've given, another shameless plug for Charlie, I've given all my team a copy of Charlie's book as well as a couple of other books as reading material. Of course, they flip it back to me and, hey, will I get overtime for reading this book? And I'm like, hey, it's personal development, but I give them time within their day to read these books, and just kind of what I want to do is be able to unlock that innovation within them, and be able to give them the confidence to be able to sit there with the business folk and have a business conversation as opposed to being considered a quote-unquote geek.
I think the other part of it is you have to lead by example, right? To show your team what does collaboration look like, that's what I've tried to do on a variety of different levels. I'm all over Twitter, I'm all over LinkedIn, I'm all over Intel IT Peer Network to give Chris a shameless plug, and they see that and. Not that you do it in a vacuum, but they see that and they start to model that behavior, right? And that's one of the things that I think is the promise of the to go back to the cloud, like I was talking earlier, is it gives you the ability to be agile and to do things faster and more efficiently for the business, so that you can focus on what adds value to the business. That's what we've been able to leverage, and I've been pleasantly surprised by the IT engineers that are on our staff that, oh my gosh, now they're up in front of an audience talking about what they've done with their virtual environment, and instead of sitting behind closed doors, or they're doing ride-alongs with the senior director of retail to see what the customer is experiencing in the stores. They never would have done that 3 or 4 years ago. So I think it's personal development, but it's also lead by example.
Well, first of all, I'm just astounded by the amount of love flowing here in this particular hangout. This is great. But we need to wrap this up. In fact, we're actually running a little bit over, but we have a unique opportunity here, and so I want to seize this. So I'm going to give you just a couple seconds to prep for this because I didn't forewarn you. But one of the things I think is interesting about Cameron's interview is that he's sitting right there in this middle, and he's challenging kind of everybody. And so, and because of that, and because of his kind of unique perspective, I think it's going to be hard to translate this, or hard for some of the folks that work for all of you to understand this. So, but we've got both IT and marketing sitting here on this. And so here's what my question is. How are you going to go back and, in 1 or 2 sentences, translate Cameron's core message to your teams? What is the big takeaway that they should have? And so, Chris, from a marketing perspective, Will and Jeff from an IT perspective, what is the big message that the people that work with you and for you should hear from this? And Chris, just because, I'm going to be nicer to Jeff and Will, I'm going to make you go first.
Ah, lovely. I think for me is we've got some projects that are going right now, and IT is critical to that. And I think my next meeting at noon is actually about that. So I'm coming in with a new role, a new perspective onto a project that's already downstream, right? So part of my role is I need to make sure we see the bigger vision of where I want to go, but realize that we have to be agile, and we've got to turn something right now that may not be perfect, and we should allow that, but make sure that that visionary of, hey, 2 steps down the road, this is where I think we should be going, and let's see if we can figure out how to adjust not the schedule, but how do we adjust the strategic direction of this project with multiple steps in mind.
I think that was about 14 sentences, but I knew you were first, so it's okay. A for effort. Right,
oh, I was getting graded on length too? Man.
Jeff, Will, what about you?
I think my message back to the team, what really struck me from listening to Cameron was you have to go back and listen. Don't go into a meeting or go into a project thinking you already know the answer. But listen to that's really, to me, the key of collaboration is listening to seek to understand instead of going in with preconceived notions.
And finally, for me, I guess to wrap it up, Charlie, it's break the silos, collaborate with the other business units, and really just have empathy with your internal customers and external customers.
All right. See, we got shorter as we went, everyone. So the proof is the more time you have, you can get it down tighter. So great job, all of you. And we've come to the end of our time, and we need to wrap this up. But I definitely want to thank each of you, Chris and Will, and Jeff. Although I have to tell you, Jeff, I did expect in the middle of all this you were going to announce that you were running for president. You know, with the big flag behind you. I was expecting it.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I think you guys provided some great insight, great advice, great ability to kind of help this translate to all the folks that are watching this. Great conversation, and I really hope that people take what both Cameron shared and how you guys helped them translate it and apply it. If you've gotten something out of this and you're watching this, don't forget to join the conversation using the hashtag TransformIT on Twitter, and then make sure you watch not only this episode, but all the other episodes of the Transform IT show that you can find out there. So that's it. Corinne, back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for being here. To our guests and everyone that's watching online, we really appreciate it. Like Charlie said, you can watch the full episode with Cameron at digitalfuture.tv. The link should be below, so please access that and make sure to become a fan so you get updates on all new interviews and all new updates with the show. And follow at Intel IT Center on Twitter for also all the latest updates. So thank you all again for watching, and we'll see you next month.